right. Good evening. Tonight is November 22nd, 2020. We're recording this live in Queens, New York. I'm Shaya, and this is Grandma. We're going to discuss her life, Grandpa's life, and a little bit of the family history so it can be preserved for eternity. We're going to do it in 3 parts. First part will be Grandma's life, sort of starting with her family history, going till about the mid-50s when she met Grandpa and got married, early 50s really. Then we'll go back, go over Grandpa's life, William Herzka's life, and then we'll go together, and then there'll be a closing message from Grandma at the end. So we will begin now. Alrighty. First, good evening, Grandma. How are you today?
I'm good.
Good. Well, thank you for agreeing to do this. It's
Anytime.
Much appreciated for everybody who will watch this. So I guess the first question will be we'll start with your family history, a little bit about your parents. We'll start there and then work our way forward.
Okay. Where do I begin? I began when I was born in 1933. Lucky year, the same year that Hitler came into power. And we lived in Berlin, Germany, which was the capital of Germany. My mother had one sister and 2 brothers. They were young, they were very idealistic, B'nai Akiva type. And the first law that Hitler made and said all Jews have to close their shops on Shabbos, they said, this is not a good sign. We're going. They left as soon as possible. They went to what was then Palestine. They lived there many years. My cousins are all still there, and I'm very close with them. My father was in Berlin, which was a big city, and didn't affect him as much until gradually. But by 1937, he said, it's time to get out. Only where to go. He was not particularly interested in Palestine, which was a socialistic state at the time. So he decided he had to go to America to get a visa, because he couldn't just go on the plane and say, I want to become a citizen and get welfare. Nobody in America particularly wanted us. So he made a lot of connections. My grandmother had some 3rd cousin there. My uncle had somebody there. And he figured he'll come and he'll try to get affidavits for the whole family to come. And of course, that was not such an easy job. I have a copy of the affidavits. Nobody particularly wanted to give these Jewish people an affidavit, because if they didn't make a living, they would be stuck and they would have to support them. What's interesting, the 2, I don't know who they were, some distant aunts, you needed 2, by the way, finally did give us an affidavit. And Shaya, you can make copies of it. It's very interesting. They must have been very wealthy. One lived in the Essex house, which was real fancy. And I do remember going to visit her once we were in America. And they had to sign that they would support them, and that they would not be, the state would not have to in any way support them. And that she had to write down, she had like $200,000 of real estate, which was fortunate at the time, and you can make a copy of it, and they're very interesting.
So I will make, for everybody watching this, we will scan these and they will be on PDF form for whoever would like them. I'll share them with everybody. Just taking a step back here. So you mentioned your mother had a sister and 2 brothers who moved to Israel in around 1933-34 frame.
Right.
Shortly afterwards. So you were very little. I guess you didn't really meet them till much later.
No, I didn't meet them till we went to Israel in the 50s.
In the 50s, okay.
And then we became very close. I mean,
what about your father? Do you have any siblings?
My father, yes. When my father went to America in 1937, he would not take any affidavits unless it included his 2 brothers and their families, which he did, and he got for everybody. Mm-hmm. And he went back, and then between 1937, which really wasn't that long, about 1.5 years, till we were able to get out. You had to get on a line. There was a quota, the quota for America was really much, much higher than they let in. The quota, remember, 95,000 people only came in, and the quota was for 304,000. So they said, well, this, but eventually our number came up, and we did leave on November 1st, 1938, which was a perfect timing because it was just before Kristallnacht.
So when you left Germany, you left with your two uncles. Your
No, my father made them go. He put them ahead of the line. They came maybe 3-4 months before us. First my Uncle David, and then my uncle.
So you were about age 5 when you left
I was
Germany, and your sister 5. Miriam was how old?
She was 2. She remembers nothing.
So do you have any memories from Berlin at all?
Very, very little. I remember going to kindergarten. They used to put like a dunce cap on you when you went to kindergarten. Somehow that stays in my mind, but maybe because I saw pictures, I really don't remember very much.
Do you remember any anti-Semitism in Germany or seeing anything?
Personally, no, but my parents did a lot. A lot. They were anxious to get out by then. And of course, they were not allowed to take any money out. So it's very interesting. As you know, Jeanette has the silver now. We had the most fancy silver. Knives, fish knives, cake knives, cake forks. Unbelievable thing. A whole credenza full of silver, which they bought. I have the receipt about 2 months before they left because they realized that if they needed the money, they could sell that silver here. And they were lucky that they were still able to get their lift out. The lift, which is the pieces, that one of those is that piece over there.
The brake front?
The brake front. Okay. And they got all the furniture out. It was in my parents' apartment for many years. And that left November 9th. After the 10th, no more lifts were allowed out of the country.
Mm-hmm. And what did your father do in Germany?
He had a leather business.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came here, he started the leather business. He had another brother, Uncle Sigmund, who was here already for quite a few years, who had a place on Spruce Street, Lower Manhattan, and he opened a little store, I don't know immediately, but eventually, and he was in the leather business.
So when you left Germany on November 1st, 1938, you went straight to America or you went somewhere else?
We stopped in England where my father's youngest brother, he was one of 5, and a sister who landed out in South Africa with her children. We stopped in England to see my grandmother because my grandmother lived with this younger brother. And we were there, I would imagine, not too long because we arrived here on the 17th, and the boat was...
Probably about a week back then.
The boat was for 5 days on the Queen Mary.
On the Queen Mary?
On the Queen Mary. So, I don't know, it sounds like about a week.
Probably about a week
there.
You were there in England.
Yeah, I do remember that a little bit.
Is that the last time you ever saw your grandmother?
No. No, after Grandpa got out of the army, the first trip we took was to England to see Aunt Gilly, his sister, and to see my grandmother. She was a lovely old lady at that time.
Mm-hmm. When did she pass away?
She was 96. So
long life on your side of the family.
That's
okay. So continuing where we are, I know we're jumping a little bit. So you arrived in America on November 17th, 1938, on the Queen Mary.
Right.
And where did you go through Ellis Island?
No, Ellis Island was closed by then. We went somewhere in Manhattan. We landed. Yes.
Yes, this is probably one of the seaports over there on the west side.
On the west side. These memories are sort of around.
So you landed in New York, somewhere on the west side.
Very bad memory of that. My Uncle Sigmund, he was a bit of a wheeler dealer. Girls know him very well. And he asked my father to bring him a camera. which I guess Leica was a very big thing.
Yeah, the German Leica.
The German Leica, and it was much cheaper probably in Germany. And my father was kind of innocent. He took out that camera to give him, and there was Port Authority or whoever was in charge then, and they took it away from him.
Mm-hmm.
And there was bad blood for a long, long time after that between the two brothers.
Okay. So where did you move to when you first came to New York?
We must have had a furnished room in the Bronx where my father had an aunt who was younger than him. We probably not very long, and then we moved to 180th Street, right away to Washington Heights, where we stayed until I got married.
In the Breuer's Kehila.
Yep.
Okay. Do you remember Breuer's? Do you remember growing up there?
Sure.
So Rabbi Breuer was the Rav back then?
Rabbi Breuer was the Rav. He signed my kasuba.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to scan all those at the end. We're going to put them all in a separate file. The camera's not going to be able to capture all
Sure,
that.
I remember Rabbi Breuer very well.
So
it wasn't such a big community. I mean, everybody knew everybody there.
So this is back in 1938. You went to a public school then, or was there a
went
Hebrew
to public school, but we had Hebrew school in the afternoon. And Rabbi Breuer was a very, very strong influence. One summer, he got on the pulpit and he said, all children must go to yeshiva. So I was in 5th grade. My sister was in 2nd grade. And that September, all the Breuer kids lined up to go to Soloveitchik. My father paid $3 a month for the tuition. And they didn't know what to do with us, because we knew all the dinim backwards and forwards. We had a very strong, we went to Hebrew school every afternoon, but of course we knew no Hebrew. And in Soloveitchik, they translated, when we learned Chumash, it was Ivrit Be'ivrit. So what they did, they took all these kids from 2nd grade to 5th grade or 6th grade, put them in one class for the first term, and we all learned Hebrew together. So we had a lot of fun.
So this was Soloveitchik, so Breuer's didn't have their own
Breuer's
school?
was not, no. Breuer's did not open until after I graduated, right afterwards.
So a little bit later in the time. So that must have been around 1943, 44.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So I guess,
I graduated 47, right?
Right around that. So none of your direct family was actually in the Holocaust, because all your father's brothers, siblings were out, and your mother's siblings were in Israel.
Even my grandparents, who remained in Germany, they lived in an interesting place called Lohr, Lohr, Lohr am Main. My grandfather, this is my mother's father, he was mashgiach, teacher, rebbe in this little town, and he was in charge of the kosher food of some kind, I don't know, it was an insane asylum, was some kind of a home for mentally sick people. And before we left Germany, we did go to visit them and say goodbye. That somehow, I remember the farm, it was like a farm area. And they died shortly afterwards, but not, nothing to do with the Holocaust.
The war.
Yeah, somewhere in the early 40s, but it hadn't affected them yet.
And they're buried there in Germany.
They're buried there, oh yeah. My cousins from Israel go to visit the tombstones all the time. I've never gone.
Okay. So and then your other some of your father's siblings, and his mother was in...
She stayed in England. Right.
Where was his father at the time?
His father was dead. I don't know what happened to them. I don't know when he died, but he was long dead, I think, by then.
So you have no memories of him?
No. He must have died before. I guess I could look it up somewhere, but no, there was nothing there. No idea what happened where he was.
Okay, so where did you?
By the way, there was another brother who was killed in World War I, Sally, fighting for the Germans.
Did your father fight for the Germans in World War I?
I have a.
Yeah, it was
whatever they call it.
The German Cross.
The Golden Cross he got. Yeah.
Did he get a pension during World War II? Because I have heard stories that some Germans who had fought in World War I got
Oh, from World War One. I don't think it. No, no. The only money they got a little bit was after the war, for the German reparation, and even that was very, very little, because although he struggled very hard in the beginning, by the time the war was over, by the end of the war, they were making nice money, and that's what it was based on.
Oh, okay, interesting. Did he own any property in Germany, or not that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. We looked into it and didn't find anything.
Right.
We obviously did not own the apartment, because there would have been some papers or something.
A good Yankee would have kept all the other documents.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that brings us, so you graduated elementary school in about 1947. Okay, and then where did you go to high school?
Went to Textile High School. Please don't ask me why. I had a friend who was going there, and it seemed like a nice place to go. Even though I was not interested in textile, I took a regular academic course. And of course, my parents were refugees. You want to go to textile? Go to textile. Not like you look into the schools today.
And that was part of the public school system.
Well, yeah, public high school, but it was great.
Where was the school?
It's still around on West 18th Street.
In Lower Manhattan.
Lower Manhattan, which was stupid because I had George Washington much closer. But it was fine. I had a good time there.
All right.
And then, while I was going there, I went to Besmedrash Road 3 times a week, schlepped down after school. First it was in West Side Institutional, and then it was the Lower East Side. And that's where I had sort of almost had a Hebrew degree. I never followed through on it, but.
So then that's the 1951 you graduated high school.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, how old were you when you met Grandpa?
I was 18.
18. And you were already in City, and you were in Hunter then? Or
No,
where did
City.
You went to City.
Yeah, with my first term at City.
How did you meet Grandpa?
Not meet Grandpa. We used to have these Shabbos groups in the afternoon. This was in not Rabbi Breuer's shul, but in another shul in the neighborhood. And the guys would come afterwards for mincha, and somehow we socialized.
Not something, not 2020.
Not like here now.
So that was under the Aguda?
We hung around. Yeah, they used to play ping pong at the Aguda Saturday night, and so we got friendly. And he had a car, so we used to go, a group of us. Once I remember, went to Bear Mountains. Somehow it's interesting because 3 or 4 of us got married from that crowd.
So you were involved in the Aguda during the war years and post-war years?
Yeah.
So you remember them sending packages to Europe and stuff?
You can see my picture in one of those.
And I believe it's the book they called him Mike.
I don't know what was.
But I think that was if I remember correctly, I don't have the book in front of me, unfortunately, but if I remember correctly, that was, you were packaging packages for Yerushalayim already.
No,
I
don't think so.
Okay, I'd have to look it up in the book.
I think we were sending them, it was after the war, and we were sending them to Europe.
Interesting. Okay, so you're about 18, 19, you're in your first semester in City College, and you met Grandpa.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to shift gears a little bit, do his history, and then we'll do the combined history from both of you.
Okay.
So, if I remember correctly, you can correct me wrong, Grandpa was born in Vienna in 1930.
Right.
The oldest child? No, Gilly's older, right?
Gilly's older.
So he was the second child.
Well. She's now 95.
95. Still lives in England, right? Up in Leeds?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So he's born in 1930 in Vienna, right? Okay, so who were his parents?
His parents were Shlomo, Siegfried, and Ella.
Esther, right?
Esther, right.
Right, okay. So he's born in Berlin. I know a lot of it is covered in his book, Willie's Life, that he never really published it. He sort of gave to the family prior to his tira, but that's where he covers a lot of these things. So many of these questions are going to be based on my remembrances from that book. I guess I should have read it before I did this. But so he's born in Berlin, in
No,
Vienna,
in
sorry.
Vienna,
So he's
Vienna.
Vienna. He's an Austrian. He grew up in Austria, and then he went on the kinder transport to
Right.
England in April of 39.
He was, I don't know, I know he was just 9, and his
So-
birthday is April 30th, so
So some late April, early May, 1939, he went on a kinder transport. So just for historical references, the kinder transports were arranged by the English government to bring children from areas.
I know the English government or the English Jewish community.
I'm not sure. That's a good question historically, which one led to it. I'm not sure there. That will have to be looked into.
Maybe a combination of both.
Where they took children from Germany and Austria, I believe it was, and brought them to England, placed them with families there so they'd survive the war. I don't know the exact number who went.
10,000?
10,000? Yeah, so 10,000 children. Some of the older ones ended up being sent to Australia during the war.
That was a different kinder transport.
Oh, that was another one, yeah. So there were several different ones. He was on one from Vienna in 1939. If I remember correctly, he first went to Belgium and then
No. Straight to England.
straight to England.
He went straight to England, and he lived there with a Jewish family until the war broke out for England, and the blitzes were, the air raids were coming, and so they wanted all children, not only Jewish children, but they wanted them out of the cities to save them. So he was with that family, I think when did the war start? 40.
So the war starts September 1st, 1939 with the German invasion of Poland.
Yeah, but
Continues from there to the German invasion of Belgium and then the Netherlands and then into France, bypassing the Marino line.
so it must have been like 41, 40,
Probably
41.
40. The Blitz of London is in 1940. The Blitz consisted of an almost nightly bombing of London and other major cities in England by the German Luftwaffe, German Air Force. During that time, the English government did try to get as many non-essential, basically women and children, out of the city as they can to save them. That included the children brought to England on the kinder transport. So at that point, he went to a little village up in England.
Right. And he went to a Jewish family. They were terrible to him. They abused him terribly. And he had a friend who was with a non-Jewish family. Oh, his Jewish family couldn't take him because they had a very small place. So they sent him to another Jewish family, and they were awful to him. And then his friend was with these non-Jews, the Griffins, and they saw how mean that they were to Grandpa. So they said, we're going to take him with the other boy. And so he lived with them for quite a while, I think 2 years. And he was very happy with
I believe
them.
he kept up with the
Oh,
Griffins.
yeah. We went to visit them. They were lovely, lovely people. Their biggest thrill in their whole lives was walking the route of the coronation that the Queen had taken. That was their big, they were real country folk, country British,
From England.
lovely English people, and they were very good to them. And they gave him a penny to go to shul every Shabbos.
I think took the tram to shul. And he stayed there till about age 13, right? When he went to a youth hostel in London, a Jewish youth hostel.
No, not in London, in High
sorry.
Wycombe.
High Wycombe. Where's
They
that?
had just started this youth hostel.
Right, and that was ran by Mr. Wolf.
Mr. Bear and Mr. Wolf. Yeah.
To German Jews.
No, I don't know. Yeah, sure.
Yekin.
They would be real Yekkes, yeah. Yeah. Well, his uncle lived in England, in London, and saw that Grandpa was with these. He was not happy. Of course, he didn't want to take him. He was also a refugee, but he did get him into that youth hostel.
Youth hostel. And that's where he had his bar mitzvah.
Right.
Or was it? Yes. Right. And that was one of the only times he communicated with his parents during the war.
No, I don't think so.
Because I know we have the family letter where they sent him a letter for
Well,
his
they
bar
sent,
mitzvah.
yeah, but I think in the beginning he heard from them,
Mhm.
and he probably wrote to them.
Right. So just taking a step back here, and we'll get back to the grandpa story. So his parents were in Vienna, and the war breaks out, and obviously it gets rough for Jews. So what did his parents do then?
His parents, his mother spoke Hungarian because she was from Matzerstorf.
That was in Czechoslovakia.
Well, it was Czechoslovakia.
Hungary
kept changing.
Depended on which day of the week it was, who.
So,
okay.
And she had a sister there. So they decided they and Uncle Oscar, Grandpa's father's brother, they figured they would sneak over the border and they would somehow get to Hungary. And I don't know if you want that whole story, but
this is for perpetuity.
They were stopped at the border. They got caught, and they were almost across. And I don't know exactly the map, but it was really what saved them, because they was brought into a prison. They were locked up, and while they were locked up in this little hole in the wall, they were pulling in all the men in Vienna itself, and so they were going into concentration camps. Anyway, I don't know how long they stayed there, but they were eventually let out, and they tried again, and they did get to Budapest, to Hungary, and they stayed in Hungary, and they were pretty safe there until 1944, when the Nazis took over Hungary.
Right, so that's up until 1944, Hungary was ran by sympathetic to the Nazis dictator.
Right.
And he then became, as the war went on, he became less friendly with the Nazis, and I believe the Arrow Cross and the Nazis.
No, that's a whole history
lesson, but just so we get the pretense.
Yeah, it would take hours to tell you that whole story.
But at that point,
At that point,
it became sort of unsafe for them. So then they went, I believe they were on the Kastner transport.
Yes, they wanted to get out. And there was this guy, Kastner, who was negotiating with the Nazis for trucks. Very complicated. Anyway, they got on that. We're not going to
get into the history of that either.
They got a lot of books about it. You can read it. And they did get on that transport together with Uncle Oscar and Tante Annie, and they were very lucky because somebody backed out. The big criticism of that Castor transport was that he took only rich and famous people. Some people backed out because they didn't trust him. They thought they were going to get into the camps, and so they got up.
How did they get on the train?
That's how they got on the train.
They were next online?
No, they were not. No. Tante Annie's sister worked for some office, some Jewish something office, and she found out that there was suddenly some spots, and they got on the list.
And the Satmar Rebbe was also on that.
Yeah, he was officially on that.
Right.
Rebbetzin Jungreis was on that. Mm-hmm. As well as a lot of young, very left-wing kids who were going to Israel. That was the deal with Israel. That gets very complicated.
Yes, very complicated. They went to Bergen-Belsen for a little bit of time, correct?
Yes. It was. Yeah. We say it was a little bit of time, but they think, to them it was really concentration camp. They were stripped, their heads were shorn, but they were lucky. They weren't they didn't realize they were lucky as compared to the other people.
Right, and they even managed to have a chauffeur for Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother story of that. And then they ended up in Switzerland, correct?
Yes. After the war, they got
I think in December of 1944 they went to Switzerland.
Yes.
From Bergen-Belsen.
Right.
And then
the war was over. They stayed in Switzerland. They had set up some kind of something. My mother-in-law was the cook, and they were.
So on Grandpa's side of the family, were anybody killed in the Holocaust on Grandpa's side?
Oh, yes. I don't know the exact numbers, but
So on the Herzka side of the family, there were a lot.
A lot.
We did not. Okay.
Close relatives,
Uncles.
cousins. I have the whole list. Sharon has the whole list, actually. But many.
So many were from Vienna. Okay. So now, after the war, Grandpa's parents are in Switzerland. He's still in England in this youth hostel. So what happened then? That they met up back in England or back in Switzerland?
Well, they went to visit he and his sister went to visit him. They were absolute strangers. It was, they lived, it was 9 years. So, was it 9 years? Yes.
He leaves in 1939, so he doesn't meet them until 46 or 47.
Right, it was 46. And then, of course, his parents wanted to come here. They waited. It was not so hard to get here at that time. And his parents coming here, he came here.
He was, what, about 17, 18?
He was 17.
17. And Gilly stayed in England, right?
Because she met her husband there. And
Henry.
They got married.
Right,
Henry. Henry was also in the youth hostel. They were in the same youth hostel. It was, he was from, not Denmark, the free city of one of those Danish countries, I don't know.
But he was a little bit older. He had served in the Air Force in World War II.
Yeah, he wasn't that much older, but
a little bit older than Grandpa, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, and then she stayed in England. Okay, so Grandpa comes to America about 1948 or so.
Yeah.
47, 48.
48, yeah.
And he also moved to Washington Heights then?
Well, yeah, sure. He moved with his parents.
And they moved to there.
They were in Washington Heights. And
so now you two.
First, he went to Forest Hills. He lived with Daphne and Dahlia's grandmother before they came. Okay. And after they came.
Oh, so he came before his parents.
He came before.
Then his parents. Right. And his mother. Okay, so they lived. What did his father do here in America?
His father in Vienna was a furrier. Came here, he got a job, something with electronic tubes, and he worked there. He had never a job, nothing great. And unfortunately, he had a terrible accident. The guy was in an old loft building all the way downtown. And he worked late, and he wanted to go down. He went down on the elevator. The elevator wasn't there, and he was killed.
What year was that?
54.
So this was after you were married. You were married.
Yeah, we had just gotten married.
Okay, and then
June 54.
What did his mother do?
And his mother. Well, at that time they did a lot because they were they were refugees and nothing. That time, I still see it. They would put. I know you went to a store to buy buttons, and the buttons were on a card, and she would sew the buttons onto the cards before they were sewn. It was piecework. She worked hard, and then they opened a little restaurant in Washington Heights, and it didn't work out too well because they had a partner or whatever, and then they was serving meals Friday night and Shabbos. A lot of the YU boys used to come there Friday night, Shabbos for meals. She cooked. She worked hard.
She was a cook up in the Borscht Belt Hotel also.
Well, yeah, one summer they went up to the Borscht Belt, right.
Right, okay. So you and Grandpa got meet in 1951, correct? Or 50? You remember 50 or 51?
51.
51, okay. And he got drafted then into the fight in the Korean War.
Right.
Okay. And he was stationed Fort Benning, Georgia?
Yeah, first he was with Fort Dix and basic training, and then he got stationed.
So you were not married at that time, correct?
Well, we got married.
So what's that story?
Yeah.
So let's share that story.
We got married. Nobody wanted us to get married. Wait till he's out of the army, but we wanted to get married. So what happens? We needed to get an apartment on the base. And you could not get an apartment on the base. It's not like today.
Mhm.
Unless you were married and proof that you were married, they would not give you an apartment. So one day, Grandpa came, called me up. He said, "I've got a 2-day leave. We're getting married." Well, I was not 21, so I couldn't go to City Hall. And so we had to get married with the Justice of Peace.
Mhm.
And my cousin came along and she lent me her ring, and it was all very romantic. And we got a marriage license. So funny, because today when I was looking for everything, I found that stupid marriage license. And he went back to Fort Benning, and we got an apartment. The reason we had to get an apartment there is because he had to work. I didn't explain that. He had to go to work on Shabbos.
Mhm.
And most of the other guys who were married just lived in the town. But he had to be able to walk to work.
Base.
So that was that story.
Mhm.
And then
Then
we were in Fort Benning.
Then you got really married about a month later.
Yeah, we got married. We had planned for this.
And that was in the Breuer still. Rabbi Breuer was
Rabbi Breuer married us. Yes. No.
So how
I
long?
think it was the last wedding that he did, if
Mm.
I'm not mistaken.
Like, 'cause he passed away shortly after that.
Yeah. So Rabbi Schwab took over. I'm not sure if he passed away afterwards, but he's
Sort of.
semi-retired.
And then you graduated from City College in what year?
And I had one term left.
Mm-hmm.
So I got married and in December 53, and I stayed. He was getting out of the army in March, St. Patrick's Day 55. But I had one term left, so I figured I'll go back to New York in January and finish up, which I did. And that's it.
So you sort of past the end of the Korean War, because the Korean War ends in 53. So you served a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So you got a degree from City College in what?
Education.
Education. Okay. And then where did you first work?
Is a marriage
This
certificate.
is the official marriage
Funny.
certificate. So this
It's
was
so
in
funny that I saved it.
Bertie S. Katzenstein, the city of New York, New York. This is the 24th day of October, 1953. Albert L. Fiorello, a justice of the city court.
Yeah, we had a guy. He was in Yonkers or something.
Witnesses is Margaret.
Margot Nola, my cousin.
Oh, your cousin Margot. And Ernst S.
That was her husband, Nola.
Nola. Manhattan, New York, license number. That's very interesting. All right, we're going to have to add this to the collection of documents. You finished these in this. You finished. You started. Where did you get a job right away as a teacher?
Yeah.
Where?
I was in Harlem, 145th and Broadway.
Oh, okay. And then where did you guys live once Grandpa was discharged?
We got an apartment in Washington Heights, 247 Wadsworth Avenue, $60 a month. And we stayed there until Barbara was born. Yeah, somewhere, right.
So what year was Sharon born?
Sharon was born January 57.
January 57. Okay.
Barbara was born
July 59.
July
I know my mother's
59.
birthday.
Jeanette was born in 63.
So Grandpa opened Sturka Radio Repair then, or?
Right, when he got out of the army, he first worked a bit. Well, he also went to, I think he did that in the evening. He worked for a television radio place in the neighborhood, Goldschmidt, and then he bought Sturka from a woman who was retiring.
Mm-hmm. And so that was in Washington Heights, his store.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what year did you move to Queens?
We moved to Queens in when? 70.
No, it must be in the 60s.
60s.
Well, your children are born in 58, 59, and 61.
So we moved when Sharon was in 5th grade.
So that would be like 67, 68.
Yeah, 68. It was
68.
68, right.
So you moved from Washington Heights to Kew Garden Hills then? Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's where you've actually lived till pretty much now. You've moved a little bit since then.
Here. Right.
But you're still here in Queens.
Still here. Let me go back.
Okay, we're going to go back a minute here.
As long as you want to know my background, just a word about how we grew up. Never mind school and all that. We never considered ourselves poor because everybody was poor. Nobody really had money. But so many little things, like I would go to the bakery and I would ask for a day-old bread. I mean, they really, really lived with so little money in the beginning. And we always, the minute I was able to, I babysat. I never asked my parents for a penny while I was in high school. Summers I always worked. I worked in office typing. I took a typing course one time because we really, they struggled. We weren't poor, but they struggled. And today nobody can picture all this. When I was 12, I went to the Levy's as a mother's helper for the whole summer. And that was the way we lived.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting time. When you first moved to the city, just talking about this time in the cities, the late 30s, early 40s, did your parents ever own a car at any point?
Oh, no. Nobody owned a car.
Okay. And then
nobody owned a car.
Did they ever take vacations?
Actually, yes. Yes, we did. We went up to Hunter, New York one year. Yeah. They did take back, and after, later on, they always went away. They went to Switzerland, places like that.
But that was much later.
Yeah, much later. But they liked vacations. There was a funny story I just thought of. This is an interesting story. During the war, we were considered enemy aliens because we were from Germany. Mm-hmm. So one day they announced on the radio that all non-citizens had to take the shortwave out of the radio. There was no television. We lived for that radio, Shortwave was a way that you could get overseas things. So my parents were such yuccas. They were so stupid. Who was ever gonna check on it? The very next morning they went down to the radio store. I'll never forget it. The radio store was like a few doors away from our building, and they took out that shortwave. Well, P.S. the radio crackled ever after that. And at one point I had scarlet fever, and all I did was listen to the soap operas on the radio. And I was, why did they take that shortwave out?
Did you have a refrigerator in your apartment?
Yeah, we had a refrigerator. We had a refrigerator with something on top, coiled.
What was the kosher food situation like back then in New York City?
There was no such thing as OU. If the ingredients were kosher, we ate it. Mm-hmm. If there was no lard in it, we ate it.
What about meats? There was a butcher?
Yeah, there were a few butchers, yes. There was no such thing as glatt. Everything was plain, but there were kosher bakeries.
Mm-hmm. And the chickens came salted, or you remember your mother salting them?
Oh, no. So, yes, I do remember my mother kosher meat. Yeah. But in the beginning, not too much later. Okay. Yeah. There were more kosher stores in Washington Heights then as now.
It was a different community back then.
Yeah. It's a big community when I was a teenager.
Well, I guess it went the same way when you first moved to Kew Garden Hills. It probably was nothing compared to what it is now.
Right.
Very different.
Nice. Very different. And that's it.
So is there any last final thoughts? I think we're right now at about 45 minutes doing this.
How long do you want to do this?
Well, we can go all night, I'm sure. But I think we've gotten the main gist
1 hour?
Our videographer's saying is we're good on time.
By the way, we almost moved to Muncie because Washington Heights was like equidistant, Muncie, Queens. Mm-hmm. So we went out to Muncie a few times to look, and I couldn't stand it. There were no sidewalks. There was no library. Could you imagine a town without a library? So we said, no, this is not for us. We're staying in the city. We're going to go on the hills.
Well, Muncie was very different back then, too.
I was never sorry.
You mentioned the Levys. The Levys ended up moving out to Muncie. You said you were their mother's helper.
Yeah.
So they ended up moving out.
So some of them did.
Some of them
went to
Paramus. They went to different places, but some of them there, and I know some of them live in Stake now. They told me they grew up across the street from a farm in Muncie. So it was definitely a different time back then.
Yep.
Yeah. So, just trying to understand the full family history. It's just amazing to think how both your father and mother's side, the immediate family, was unaffected by the Holocaust, even though you were born in Berlin.
Right.
And
we were lucky.
And Grandpa's
lucky, and really the Germans, the Jews in Germany had plenty of warning. I mean, Hitler said right out he wants to get rid of us. He threw out the doctors. He burnt the books. I mean, they had warning. They thought it was going to go away, number one. Number two, they didn't know where to go. America didn't want them. It was very, they were stuck. But they could have gotten out. Yeah. Not like Austria, which was taken over one day.
Right.
And
Poland and other countries. That's very interesting. All right. I think we've covered everything. We've covered a lot tonight. Maybe we'll do a second part. I guess the real question now comes is, what last message do you want to leave for everybody who will ever watch this in eternity, to the family and to the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren?
A background is very important. There's certain things that are part of you, but it doesn't have to mold you. In other words, you have a lousy background, you could still be a good person. But it's nice to know, you come from people that are honest, that that tried their best, that worked hard, and it's part of your heritage. It's something. I mean, obviously, because you're interested. I was so amazed on Friday when these girls were asking me all these questions. How did you get to the boat? They were so fascinated. I said, how did I get to the boat? I guess with a train, And so they really cared. I was telling them when we were in England, my aunt must have bought us dresses, all matching. My cousin, my sister, and I. My sister has never forgotten that dress because she wore it. Her dress. She wore my dress. And when that was finished, she had to wear my cousin's dress. She wore it for about 5 years. Little things like that. They're part of your heritage. And
what year did your father pass away?
My father passed away in 77.
77.
He was just before his 80th birthday. Mm-hmm.
So he was quite a bit older by the time he even had children.
Well, people didn't have children until they had a parnassa.
Right, it was a little different back then.
I don't think he got married before he had a parnassa, probably.
Right, because if he served in World War I and you were born in 1933...
He got married.
He must have been in his 30s by then.
Yeah, I think he was like 30, 31, something like that, yeah.
Which is the interesting difference there, that there was such a... People got married so much older back then.
Right. You didn't get married until you had a job, or you had enough money or to support a family or whatever. By the way, I was born at home.
Homeward.
Yeah.
Right. Colnidre night, right?
That's it.
Yeah. So we can go all night talking about different things of the family, but I think the important message, and something Grandpa always liked to say, was that as each generation goes and we remain, the big thing to remember is to remain good from Jews, he always liked to say, and stay together as family. Grandpa always felt that was important.
He was, and it is. And the older you get, the more you appreciate your family. I think I said that yesterday when I spoke. So many people who have, especially now during this disease, who have no family and they're all alone and depressed. And if you have family, you get to see them and you get to be with them, and they're part of you.
Yeah. All right.
And I love them all. And I miss my Israelis already.
Well, hopefully soon the vaccine's here. We'll get you over to Israel to visit everybody. Well, some of them came in to visit you this weekend.
Yeah.
You did get to see some of them.
I was so glad. They were so cute.
Yes. So I think this concludes it.
Okay. Thank you, Shaya.
Like I said, I will scan all the documents Grandma has. We'll put them in form so people can view them and see the different parts of the history.
Okay.
We thank everybody for joining us.
Whoever's interested. And I think they all are.
Yeah, I think everybody is.
Yaakov called before he was so excited. He said, I told Shaya to do this a long time ago.